What sets Pyxis Lab apart in the water treatment industry? It's our commitment to innovation, accuracy, and user-friendly solutions. Our OxyPanel Plus eliminates reagents and simplifies maintenance. Our PTSA expertise ensures precise chemical dosing. Our radar level sensors offer cutting-edge monitoring capabilities. But more than that, we understand that water treatment professionals deserve better tools. That's why we're constantly pushing the boundaries of water treatment technologies. Ready to experience the Pyxis Lab difference? Go to scalinguph2o.com/Pyxis. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/PYXIS. Pyxis, because water professionals deserve better. Three industry titans, Masters Company, Radical Polymers, and MFG Chemical, have joined forces to create your ultimate one-stop shop for your water treatment needs. We're talking over 60 years of Masters Company's expertise in private label products and cutting-edge test kits. Radical Polymers' game-changing Inisha additives, and MFG Chemical's custom manufacturing prowess. These American companies are bringing you top-notch quality and reliability all under one umbrella. From blending and ultra-concentrates to specialized polymers and custom solutions, they've got you covered. And with multiple AWT Supplier of the Year awards between them, you know you're getting the best of the best. Ready to revolutionize your water treatment game? Head over to scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/MFG. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. I know you can't wait for the AWT convention taking place November 11th through 15th. While you're there, be sure to stop by and see the whole gang from Masters, Radical Polymers, and MFG Chemicals at booths 200 through 208. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm your host, Trace Blackmore, certified water technologist. And Nation, I am so excited because next week is the Super Bowl of celebrations in the water treatment industry. It's definitely the Super Bowl for the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Why is that? Well, it is because next week is Industrial Water Week. And we are so excited here at the Scaling Up H2O podcast. We do call it our Super Bowl because it is where we release a brand new episode each and every day of the week to help you celebrate Industrial Water Week. And folks, I want to tell you, this is no easy task. We're essentially doing 5 weeks worth of work for 1 week. That is how much I and the rest of the staff here care about you, the Scaling Up Nation. It's how much we want you to have the best Industrial Water Week ever. And the way you can help say thank you for all of that is to have the best Industrial Water Week ever. And it's our hope that your Industrial Water Week plans are to listen to this podcast each and every day next week, starting on Monday. Of course, Monday is pre-treatment Monday. And then you want to tune in on Tuesday for Boiler Tuesday. And you've already done it twice. You may as well tune in on Wednesday for Cooling Wednesday. And now you're over the hump, so you're going to listen on Thursday for Wastewater Thursday. And then the very last day of Industrial Water Week, tune in on Friday for Careers Friday. It's going to be a fantastic week. We've got so much in store for you. If you've seen all the things that we've been working on and putting together, you would say, oh my goodness, how can you do all of this just for 1 week? Well, Nation, we do it. It's not our first year doing it, and we're doing that for you, the Scaling Up Nation. So we're going to celebrate each one of those themes every day. We're also going to hear from a lot of the guests that we've heard from on this podcast. And Nation, for the first time ever, we have a brand new Detective H2O for each and every day. Now, we've been featuring Detective H2O for Industrial Water Week for a couple of years now. And for the last couple of years, we always put in there one brand new installment of Detective H2O. Well, not this year. This year, 5 brand new installments of Detective H2O. And the Scaling Up Nation loves Detective H2O. It is such a fun way to talk about our industry, to learn about our industry, and also to share about our industry. So, James McDonald, thank you for not only developing that character, but all the hard work that you do to bring him to life. And you're not going to want to miss a single episode because each episode has a brand new Detective H2O. But it's not just a brand new Detective H2O. Now, any normal podcast, they would stop there. They would have stopped at just having an episode each and every day. No, we're going to bring you a brand new Detective H2O every day. And now, because we are the Scaling Up H2O podcast, we're going to go even one more step out there, and we are going to bring you a brand new guest voice each and every day. Nation, the celebration is amazing, but it still doesn't stop there because we are playing along with Detective H2O on our social media, on our LinkedIn page, where can you guess who that special guest voice is? Now, you've heard them before at some time or another on this very podcast, but Nation, come on. How many things could we squeeze in to an episode, and then we're doing it 5 times next week, all to help you celebrate Industrial Water Week? We have pulled out all the stops, and there is no reason for this not to be your best Industrial Water Week ever. And I'm going to ask that you don't just listen to the episodes, you don't just play along with the social media games that we're going to do, but you also post to celebrate each and every day while we're in Industrial Water Week. So when we're in Pre-Treatment Monday, you are servicing that RO. It's your favorite RO. You've got a special name for it. Well, don't just talk to the RO. Take a picture with the RO and hashtag that to IWW25 and Scaling Up H2O. And Nation, enjoy seeing all the members of the Scaling Up Nation each and every day posting pictures of their favorite equipment. Maybe it's in front of their favorite customer. Maybe it's with one of their mentors, but we are going to see how connected the Scaling Up Nation is. And let me tell you, when I see all these pictures come up each and every year, and now I'm having a bad day out in the field, or maybe I'm in that mechanical room, I'm all by myself, I'm thinking, there are other people that are doing the same thing that I'm doing, and that makes me feel just a little bit better. I'm connected through this podcast to all of those members of the Scaling Up Nation, and next week is the week where we get to see pictures of all the people within the Scaling Up Nation. So once again, those hashtags are IWW25 and Scaling Up H2O. Nation, I can't wait for next week, and we're going to celebrate together. By the way, if you are going to enjoy the water cake this year, we'll make sure to have that recipe on there. We've heard several people some people say, hey, the water cake's not bad. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the water cake was something that we brought up, I don't know how many years ago. It was probably when we first started celebrating Industrial Water Week. I think this is year 8. And it is a cake that has no perishable ingredients in it. It's basically flour and water. Doesn't that sound delicious? But we'll have the recipe out there, and there is one company that says that is their rites of passage. When they bring on a new team member, they have to eat the water cake. So I don't know if you're listening that you're doing that. I don't know if you're listening and you're thinking that's a good idea. I'm going to start doing that. But if you want the recipe, we're going to have that there. When do you want to do that? Well, that will be on Friday. Now, what a lot of people do is maybe they tried the water cake once and they said, that's disgusting. I'm not going to eat that again. There are people out there that like it. I am not one of those people. But a lot of people will go to their bakery and they'll put the Industrial Water Week logo on a cake, or maybe their company logo, or maybe a picture of their last company event. And they will celebrate with their team on Friday. So if you do that, please take a picture of that. And nation, take advantage of Industrial Water Week. We need an entire week to celebrate what it is that we do. And next week is that week. Please take advantage of it. If you're in charge of a team, please lead your team in that celebration. We're so busy doing day-to-day activities. We need to take time when it's time to celebrate and make things happen next week within your team where you are celebrating Industrial Water Week. Maybe you're doing some internal posting. Maybe you are doing that cake on Friday. Do something because that's going to help the team and it's going to help you celebrate the best holiday of the year, Industrial Water Week. Well, speaking of the person who's responsible for Industrial Water Week, that's our friend James McDonald, and here is a brand new installment of What Are You Know?
Hello and welcome to What Do You Know? The game show where we find out what do you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, what do you call the waste stream coming out of a reverse osmosis unit? It is commonly called concentrate or reject, but also referred to as brine. Of course, one person's waste stream is another person's treasure, with alternative uses sometimes found for this water. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Well, thank you, James. And if you need to catch up with any of the past What Are You Knows, you can go to our show notes pages and we will have all of those listed for you there so you can continue playing with all of the Scaling Up Nation. Well, Nation, I want to make sure that you are always staying abreast of what is coming up in the water treatment community. And the Plumbing Manufacturers International is having their Manufacturing Success Conference November 3rd through 6th in Chicago, Illinois. We're going to have all the information that you're going to need on that on our events page. And while you're there, go ahead and check out the American Waterworks Association. And they're having their North American Water Loss Conference December 2nd through 4th in Louisville, Kentucky. This is held every year and it addresses the challenges of lost drinking water and revenue around water utilities. So if this is a field that has some interest for you, by all means, you will want to check that out. And finally, in New Orleans, December 9th through 11th is Groundwater Week. So make plans to attend Groundwater Week in New Orleans, and who wouldn't want to be in New Orleans in December? We're going to have all that information for you on our events page, not only for those items, but all the things that I have not mentioned. And folks, there are hundreds of events out there. So make sure you know what is coming up because there might be that one thing that you want to know about and you want to network at. And we want to make sure not only you know about it, but you're able to register for it and you are able to plan for it And we've made that as easy as possible by going to scalinguph2o.com, going over to our events section, and you have all the information that you desire. Well, Nation, I'm always trying to bring information to you that will help you in your day-to-day. And a lot of times that's around technology. A lot of times that's around chemistry. But sometimes it's around a topic like mental health. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And Nation, I'm going to introduce you to my good friend, Dr. Andy Melton. Here's that interview. My lab partner today is Dr. Andy Melton, professional counselor and executive coach at Melton Counseling. Andy, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Hey, thank you, Trace. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you here. You and I are in another group together, and of course, we get to share each other's company on a regular basis, and I get the benefit of all of your knowledge that you get to share on a regular basis, and thank you for allowing me to pick your brain a little bit on the topic that I think we probably should be talking more about, but for some reason we just don't, and that's mental health. So thank you for coming on the show and talking about that with us.
Glad to do it. Yeah. Thanks for having me. And you're right. I think a lot of our discussion today will be around the workplace in particular and the viewpoint of an employer to the employees or the employees themselves. You know, mental health exists no matter where we are. And so it'll be really good to talk about how it impacts us in the workplace.
Andy, before we get started, do you mind telling the Scaling Up Nation a bit about yourself?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So I have been a professional counselor licensed in the state of Tennessee, and I'm based here in Nashville for the past 15, 20 years, something like that. Several years ago, I started a practice. I have 3 groups that I tend to work with the most: disconnected couples, restless entrepreneurs, and adult anxiety. And sometimes my clients have all 3 of those things and they want to discuss all of them, which is great. I've been able to do professional counseling now for a while, really enjoy that. And here in the past year, I've started doing more coaching and executive coaching. And if your listeners aren't familiar with that, it's different than counseling. And so we can talk about that if that's useful. Just personally, just a little bit of data there. My wife and I, Crystal, we've been married over 25 years now. We have 2 young adult children, 20-year-old daughter, Delaney, and my son, McCabe. And we live here in the Nashville area and just love it. When I'm not working, I love any sort of sports and then just spending time with the family as much as I can. But yeah, that's my life at the moment here.
And you're a musician as well.
Yeah, vocalist and a guitarist. So being in the Nashville area is pretty comfortable. But I grew up that way. I grew up in the music industry and I grew up in a tour bus traveling the nation and those sorts of things. So I have a lot of background there too, yeah.
The first time we met in person, you asked me if I was a baritone or a tenor, I believe.
Oh, yeah, because of your microphone behind you there. I automatically thought vocalist, not podcaster. But yeah, what was your answer to that question, I wonder?
I don't know how to answer that. I do not sing. People normally ask me to stop when I do. I will sing Sinatra for a karaoke or something like that. I'm nowhere near as talented as Frank Sinatra, but I would say I'm somewhere in probably that lower register. Well, Andy, let's just get right into it. And like I mentioned in the opening, we just don't talk enough about mental health, especially in the workplace. Why is that? Why does it have the stigma that it does? Because we all deal with it. We all know somebody, if it's not us, that is dealing with something perhaps even catastrophic, but yet we're not talking about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think our mental health impacts us as a person. It impacts us as a professional. And therefore, in the workplace, it's challenging to have those kinds of discussions, whether we are the manager looking in on one of our direct reports, or whether we are the employee thinking about talking to our superior about mental health. It's a challenge because struggles in mental health still have stigma. And you can, as an employee, for example, you can be just honestly, you can be judged by some of the things you might talk about in regards to mental health. So, yeah, a lot of people avoid it. I get it. I understand it. But I do think there's a way, and we're going to talk about it. I do think there are ways to handle this sensitive subject in the workplace.
What are some of the most common signs we should be looking for declining mental health in the workplace?
Yeah. So whether you're wondering this about yourself, that's a great question, or maybe a coworker, or maybe one of your direct reports, things to look for in regards to mental health. You start with just watching behaviors and seeing their performance and productivity. If it takes a sudden drop, that's certainly something to look for. Withdrawal, if they're normally decently social, but they aren't anymore, as you're looking at other people, if they're absent quite a bit or if they're late a lot, irritability, procrastination. We all go through these things sometimes, but if it's excessive, then it's a good thing to ask the question. Now, again, kind of going back to what we just said about when you bring up mental health in the workplace, it can affect the view people have of you. So I understand why people are careful with it. But sometimes a drop in productivity, for example, is more mental health than it is just say somebody's dropping the ball or not carrying their weight. Many times it can be something they're dealing with. Some other signs that you might look for if you're concerned about somebody's mental health is their concentration, their negative thinking. If you see a big change in how they talk about themselves or other people, with they're typically neutral or more optimistic and they've become very negative. Another set of signs is just their physical. If they're tired a lot, if their appearance changes quickly, if you notice that they're dealing with headaches or stomach issues, then a lot of times that can be mental health related. One thing to mention there, Trace, is part of my work that I've done over the past several years is in the medical setting. So primarily primary care. So if somebody has a primary care physician, which 80% of folks in our country do, it is commonly understood in a primary care setting that 70% of the issues that primary care deals with, 70% are mental health related. And so physicians, they're not trained necessarily to deal with mental health, but they know that the vast majority of the issues that they treat are more mental health related than anything else. So it is really good to check out things like fatigue and appearance and headaches and those kinds of things. And then finally, taking a look at their morale, how they interact with other people, their sensitivity to feedback, their burnout, those kinds of ideas are also indicators of potential mental health problems.
Now, for ourselves, we may not see some of those symptoms. What are some of the things that we should notice about ourselves that could key us in? Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe there is a mental health issue.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to see it in ourselves. In my world, in professional counseling and coaching, we often joke that, as a counselor, I am a mirror for my clients. And even as a coach, I am a mirror. And if you don't have a counselor in your life, if you don't have a coach in your life, sometimes you don't have that type of mirror. And so you don't see it as well. And so maybe counseling or coaching can help you see these more readily. But just on a typical day, coworkers or superiors, you're not always going to learn from them, hey, I'm dealing with something. They're not always going to reflect like a mirror like you would in a counseling office. They're not going to show you what you're dealing with. And it's hard to see it in yourself. If you think of our mental health like a dashboard on a car, that's one of my favorite metaphors where, you have these lights that come on, these warning lights, check engine lights, and so on. Well, some of those dashboard lights that you can check for real quickly is you're eating and you're sleeping. So if there's a chance you're dealing with some mental health, but you're not sure, take a look at those two parts of your life. If you find that you're overeating or undereating, oversleeping or undersleeping, your body will tell you a lot of times before your other systems of your being will tell you, your body will tell you. And so eating and sleeping are one of those ways to check in. If you want to be more intentional, you could definitely answer some questions for yourself on the regular. For example, stress levels, and maybe you want to even scale it for yourself. Everybody's a little different, but if somebody is a journaler, for example, they might keep track of their stress levels on a scale of 1 to 10. Their energy levels, that's another great concept or phenomenon to keep track of. Your engagement at work, that's another sort of trackable part of our lives. Are you excited about your work, or do you feel more numb and detached? Stability, there's another 1 to 10 scale. And so these are useful measurements to keep on ourselves because sometimes we can't see it. And it's not until we've missed a few days of work or until a friend confronts us before we know what's going on. If you can pay attention to your eating and sleeping and pay attention to maybe some of those trackable measures and compare with the past to where you are now and so on, that can be really useful to become aware of what's going on in your life.
Andy, as an employer, I want to engage in conversations like this, but I'm worried, am I able to engage in conversations like this? Am I crossing a line by asking some of those questions? So how can you care without crossing the line? And what exactly is that line?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's part of the reason mental health in the workplace is really challenging. It's challenging both for the person dealing with the mental health, but it's also challenging for the person noticing the mental health, right? If that's a coworker, sometimes it can be hard to discuss it or ask questions around it. If it's a superior, that can be really challenging. And here's one of the reasons why. And not a lot of people think of it this way, but there's a lot of truth to this. The lane that you're in as, for example, an employer, it is really challenging as an employer to be a neutral sort of resource in someone's life, especially in terms of mental health. So as an employer, if you notice somebody is struggling, one of your direct reports is struggling, you can go to them and ask some questions for sure, but there is a natural conflict of interest there because you are not a neutral party in their life. You are an evaluator of their performance in their work. And therefore, it can be really challenging, even if you're genuinely concerned about them personally. It can be really challenging to bring that up and to have an honest conversation about it with that person. They may not view you and very likely don't view you as a neutral party. That's one of the reasons that counselors and coaches can be a useful service is they are, by definition, they are clinical, they are neutral, they don't have skin in the game. And so they can listen to someone's experiences with their mental health from a completely separate perspective, from an objective perspective. When you're in the workplace, it makes it really challenging because you're not a neutral party, you are an evaluator. Now, you still can check in on them, but it's good to know your role. And that's one thing I would share with your audience is if they're in a situation where they have someone that they're wanting to check on, know your role, that you can ask some questions, and we're going to talk about that, but you need to stay in your role because you aren't a neutral party. Rather, you're an evaluator of their performance. And so it makes it very challenging to have some of those conversations.
So many questions around that. So I see this person, something's not right. Obviously, their best performance is in our best interest. So what am I able to say to, I'm concerned about you, your work is suffering, this isn't like you. Where do we go with that conversation?
I think the conversation needs to be had. Don't get me wrong. I think it needs to be had, but it needs to be had with the understanding that there's a natural conflict of interest when somebody is asking these questions, right? And hey, if you're a self-aware enough employer to kind of see that, and you might even lead with that. Hey, I know I'm your employer. And I know it's part of my job to evaluate your performance. And there are some things that I've been seeing, and I just want to be real with you. Here's what I'm seeing, and I just want to check in on you. That employer wouldn't necessarily expect or wouldn't want to expect that employee to fully lean into that because of the conflict of interest. However, it needs to be asked, and the employee can, and if they feel comfortable with it, they can describe it, what they're going through. But it's done best when that employer knows their role. It's honestly a little tricky because the conversation needs to happen, but it's also best when both people know their role and know their position in that conversation.
Yeah, because bottom line is we're all relying on each other to do a particular job. And for whatever reason, if that job isn't getting done, that's putting strain on somebody else to pick up the slack. So eventually, if it's not fixed, then that person, for whatever reason, is no longer able to do that job.
And they're not doing that job, their performance level impacts you. So if you're a superior, your direct reports, their work impacts you. If you're a coworker and you're asking somebody about their work performance, it impacts you. So the conversation needs to happen, but it's very different than, say, a clinical setting where no matter what we say, it doesn't impact our counselor or our coach in any way, right? They're separate from our life. But anybody in the workplace that's asking you about your mental health, they're involved, right? Because it could be that your mental health is impacting them and their work experience.
In order to have a conversation like this, and people know that people are asking because they genuinely care about the other person, that culture has to be present. There has to be a culture of trust and caring, and each other is building the other. How do we ensure that we're building companies like that with that culture?
Yeah, great question. One of my favorite business books over the past decade is Kim Scott's Radical Candor. If you're not familiar, it's a great book. I think it's a decade old now, but she was on the C-suite level with both Apple and Google, and she wrote a book, Radical Candor, about her experiences as an executive. In the book, she brings up what she calls two hooks to hang everything on when you are an executive or you're in a position of leadership. She says one is to care personally, to genuinely have a vested interest in your people and to care about them on a personal level. That other hook is to challenge directly. And so your role as an executive, as a leader, is to provide feedback, is to evaluate their performance and to be very direct about it. And so Kim Scott makes a great point of both of those have to exist simultaneously. And some leaders are good at one and not the other. And some leaders don't do either very well, I suppose. But the best leaders are the ones that can hold space for both of those, to care personally and to challenge directly.
How would you evaluate, do I have the culture that we're talking about right now?
When people know their roles and they can ask open questions and know that they have the support, that's really important. And so a few of the things to consider when you're creating that type of culture, for example, if you have somebody who you want to check in on is a culture of open-ended questions. Okay. So, hey, how are you feeling about things right now? How are you doing with your workload? What's been challenging for you lately? Is there anything I can do to better support you? These are open-ended questions which seem a little bit common sense, right? It's not as common as we might think in the workplace. And so a lot of times when somebody is checking on someone, it's closed. They're closed conversations. They're looking for a particular answer instead of allowing them the freedom to respond in whatever way they want to and need to. And so a culture of open-ended questions is a great ideal for a culture that's open to discussing mental health in the workplace. Also, normalizing mental health conversations, just having it be a normal thing, maybe in meetings or in one-on-ones, to where there's always a question about how they're doing, not just their work performance. Another way potentially to help create a culture of healthy mental health in the workplace is to conduct anonymous surveys that give people a chance to discuss their mental health, but do it anonymously. Again, because of that conflict of interest, sometimes it's hard to discuss it. Here in the Nashville area, to give you an example, we are not far from a large military base. And I've had through the years many military men and women as clients for my practice. And they have to drive a bit to come see me, but they do because, I get this a lot. They say mental health in the military is still coming along. It's very challenging to be open about your mental health in the military because it can impact your rank and promotions and your daily experience in the military. And so many times I get folks in my practice who know they're coming to me, who has nothing to do with the military, right? There's no conflict of interest there. They can be open about what they're feeling. And so creating a culture where mental health is discussed in the workplace, sometimes anonymous surveys can be a great way to give people that opportunity to discuss things without engaging in that conflict of interest. Another is to promote psychological safety. This is another cultural concept that can really be useful in the workplace, is to have regular information or psychoeducation going out to your folks. And as an employer, you might have some training there or be able to provide some information for your teams, or you might bring somebody in like a counselor or a coach who is separate and again, doesn't have that conflict of interest. And so they can speak openly and freely about mental health in the workplace. And so bringing in that type of information, giving that to your folks can be really useful. And then, of course, offering those resources as a regular offering. Hey, we have EAPs available, employee assistance programs. If you're familiar with that term, a lot of companies have EAPs available for their folks, which means we as a company will help you get connected with a counselor or a coach. We are not involved in that. We don't get that information. It is completely separate, but we provide you the opportunity to do that. So it may be an EAP service. It may just be counselors or coaches in the area, but that's another great way to make resources available and to create a culture, let's say mentally healthy culture.
Andy, I hate to give you a what if scenario, but this popped in my head and I'm thinking our listeners might be thinking it as well. Let's say we do an anonymous survey and somebody is very honest because it's anonymous. And then we get that survey back and they say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Or maybe they even say they're suicidal. What do we do?
Great question, because, you open the lanes for that, you open the conversation for that, and sometimes you'll get some very honest feedback. And by the way, if you ever get a survey like that, and especially an anonymous survey, if it makes you feel very uncomfortable as an employer or a coworker, just know you're in good company. That's a tough survey to get if you have somebody that's describing some serious mental health issues. We'll talk about it through an employer perspective here. There's a few things you can do if you get a survey like that. Employers know their employees enough that they may have an idea of who that survey is coming from. Maybe somebody who's dealing with some of the symptoms that we discussed earlier, some of the symptomology of the behavioral, the cognitive, the physical, the social, emotional things. And you just kind of are noticing, that might have come from so-and-so. I think it's okay to go to that person and to take a guess, not necessarily bring up what's on the survey and not to use big terms like, for example, suicidal or those kinds of things, but rather just to check in on them and say, hey, we did those surveys. You remember when we did those surveys last week or yesterday? We got a survey or two that were decently serious about mental health. And I just wanted to check in. And you and I have talked about mental health before. I'm just checking in with you. Is that one of your surveys, or is there anything that you're dealing with? It's just something I'm checking on everybody about. So you can go that direction, and maybe you'll get somebody who's saying, yeah, that's my survey. And then we can talk about what to do beyond that. Another option here is to put it out to everyone. Hey, we did some surveys and there were some, a few surveys that were pretty serious. And if this was your survey, we have somebody available. We need to discuss this. We need to talk. So if anybody you're talking to is not giving you that information, it is okay to put that out to everyone and just say, hey, if you filled out a survey and you want to talk, here's a great way to do that. Now, once you've identified the person who, let's say, suicidal, they've expressed it through the survey or they've expressed it directly. And then there's another set of steps to go through to make sure. And one of the biggest steps is just contacting a mental health professional and having them guide you through it. If you have a resource for your team, say a mental health professional who you've worked with in the past, get them in on it, or reaching out at that point, reaching out to a new resource would be understandable. Mental health professionals are used to dealing with these situations. And so I would definitely recommend relying on them to help you through that process of making sure your employee is safe, even though they're not doing well at that moment.
Andy, when we went to the one person we thought filled out the survey, let's say they say, no, that's not mine. Did I just violate somebody's confidence?
Yeah, it'd have to be done with care. That's for sure. That's for sure. But it's such important information that you'd have to take the risk of trying to find out who's dealing with this and how can we help them. If nobody's admitting to it and nobody's coming out with that information, I think an employer can do enough to get the word out, to check with people, and basically, in a sense, check all the boxes to make sure they know they did what they could. I like that you brought this up, Trace, because it is a hypothetical that is possible if you were to ever do surveys, mental health surveys in your company, but it's tricky on how to manage these kinds of things. And so that's why I say, being in lockstep with a mental health professional that can help you through that is a really good thing to do.
Andy, I think we all know the number 911, but probably very few know 988. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have many resources in most communities and on the national level to address serious mental health. For example, suicidality, homicidality, and psychosis. These are the three that are the most intense mental health crises that we face. Suicidality obviously is harm to self or an attempt to take one's own life. Homicidality, to take someone else's or to harm someone else. And psychosis is sort of a break from reality. And in any of those cases, and those can show up in the workplace. It's very scary when they do, but they can show up in the workplace. 988 is a national number that can be called to discuss those things. It's traditionally used as a suicidal hotline that either a person themselves, if they are feeling it, they can call, or a concerned friend or family member or coworker can make that call, 988, and they will walk them through the steps of getting that person help. In addition to 988, there are lots of local and regional resources. A lot of people don't know about those because unless you've dealt with these sort of severe things, it's just not on your radar. But there are local numbers, and most every county in the nation has what's called a crisis team or a crisis hotline that's local and will actually come to the site of the person, whether that's at the workplace or home or wherever, and they will evaluate that person and help keep them safe. Those are typically referred to as crisis teams, or mobile crisis is a common term as well. So if in your community, and especially if you're an employer, if you have those numbers readily available and you're putting those out to your teams, you have access to national, but also regional and local resources that way.
The more stressed we get, the more worse whatever issue that we're dealing with can have on us. So managing that stress is very important. Most of the people listening to this podcast, they're getting calls from the office, the customer, vendors, and probably 12 other people that I didn't mention. So they are leading very stressful lives. What are some things that we should all be doing to manage stress so we have more bandwidth to deal with other things?
The first step is awareness of our stress. right? And so to being aware, and that's kind of what we talked about earlier, is taking account of how we're feeling and maybe even tracking it, those kinds of things. Listening to our bodies, like I said, eating and sleeping, and some of those dashboard check engine lights, if you will, that come on. And so being aware of it is important. Another thing to consider are some very practical exercises that we can do as individuals that help us navigate stress. Now, the word stress is a very broad term, right? And it just kind of encompasses so many things. And everybody probably has their own definition. But I think if you boil it down, emotional distress of some sort of negative emotional experience would sort of encompass this idea of stress. And so if you're feeling this way, there are some things you can do to help. And one of the theories is that when we're stressed, our mind, body, spirit, interactions with other people, it all gets incongruent, or a better term that I grew up with, discombobulated, right? Where they're all over the place. So let's take the mind and the body, for example. When you're stressed, your mind and body are often disconnected, let's say. Okay. So let's say someone is anxious, they're dealing with some anxiety. This is an oversimplified way to discuss this, but just for the sake of our discussion today, anxiety is when our mind is sort of separated from our body in a way that we're thinking about things in the future, and we're almost stuck in the future. So for example, if somebody's got a project coming up and it's very stressful and it makes them very anxious, their mind is running ahead of them, if you will, and it's disconnected from the now, from their body. And so it puts extra stress and tires you out more than you would be, say, if your mind and body were aligned or they were all together. By the way, depression is sort of the opposite of that, where our mind is sort of stuck in the past and we're needing to sort of unite our present body with our mind that's thinking about past things, or maybe even occupied or obsessed with past things. It leads us to a place of depression. So anxiety and depression, again, this is an oversimplification of these terms, but it's kind of a unique way to look at anxiety and depression. One has us stuck in the future, one has us stuck in the past. But here's the thing, we don't live in the future or the past. We only can live right now. And so, for example, Trace, you and I, we're here right now. We are on this call. We are sitting in these seats. We are, having this conversation. We are here right now. But if either of us were dealing with a high level of anxiety or depression, we would kind of be here right now, but we really wouldn't. Our mind would be somewhere else. So let me give you 2 or 3 ways here, 2 or 3 strategies to help bring your mind and body back together, if that might be useful. And these are all things that you can do on the job, at your desk, or in the truck, if you're driving somewhere, or whatever the scenario. All of these things can be done to help unite your mind and body. These are often called grounding techniques. And that's kind of where that term grounding comes from, is our mind is off somewhere else, and we need to sort of get back to the now, and we need to bring it back and ground ourselves to kind of reunite everything. The first thing to consider, Trace, is breathing. And you hear this a lot in mental health circles. One of the reasons breathing is so important is it's something we do all of the time, whether we are thinking about it or not. When we pay attention to our breathing, it can help take that anxious mind or that depressed mind and bring our mind back to the now and align it with our present self, because we're paying attention to our bodies and we're paying attention to our breathing. One of the ways to do this is called a 4-second breathe box. In your mind, imagine the 4 sides of a box. On one side of that box, draw that box, if you will, sort of up in an upward motion on the side of the box, and breathe in while you're doing that for 4 seconds. The top of the box, as you sort of draw that line across in your mind, That's holding your breath for 4 seconds. The other side of the box, as you come down, that's breathing out for 4 seconds. And finally, the bottom of that box is breathing normally. There's nothing special, by the way, about 4 seconds particularly, but it just helps us have an idea of the time for each side of the box. If you are feeling extra stressed, you can engage in a 4-second breathe box for, say, 2 or 3 times in a row, just giving yourself the opportunity to sort of notice your breathing, bring your mind back to the now, and it helps to be grounded that way. So 4-second breathe box is great. It can be done inconspicuously, right? You can be in a room full of people and nobody needs to know you're doing this. Now, if you are by yourself and you don't mind doing this, you might even involve your body by actually drawing the box out with your hand, sort of out in front of you. And of course, engaging your breathing that way, it can really engage your present self. A second strategy is called a sensory scan. And this is where, when our mind and body are separated, one of the ways is to notice our senses, our 5 senses. The senses are kind of how we know we're existing, the things we hear, the things we see, the things we taste, and so on, the touch and smell. It kind of lets us know, oh, I'm in the room right now, right? I can feel these things. Well, that's a great way to help ground us when we're stressed, because by noticing different parts of our senses, it can really help. And so, for example, go through all 5 of your senses and notice 4 stimulus from each sense. Notice 4 things that you can see that maybe you didn't notice before that exercise. 4 things you can feel, for example, your feet on the ground or your rear end in the seat or whatever the case. And just kind of walk through your senses and notice 4 different stimulus from each sense. It just takes a few moments, but it can really help draw us in to the present. Finally, another strategy, the third one I'll share today, is called a body scan, also called a progressive muscle relaxation. And this is where, and again, you can do this in a room full of people if you need to, but it's where you start with muscle groups. Let's say your toes at the very bottom of your body here. You crinkle or contract the muscles in your toes for 4 seconds. Again, nothing special about 4. It just helps us remember. You contract those muscles for 4 seconds and then release. And then do it one more time. Contract your toes and the muscles in your toes, 4 seconds, and then release. Move up to that next muscle group, which might be your ankles, and kind of contract those muscles, 4 seconds, release, 4 seconds, release, and then work your way up each muscle group. Again, you can do this around people. Nobody can notice you're doing it, but it does a great job at grounding us. And when we're super stressed, it kind of helps us get back into our bodies and align our minds and our bodies. And on that body scan, that last exercise, I will tell you that is an excellent one for laying down at night, and especially if you can't sleep or if your mind is racing. That's a great one to do while you're laying down at night. Work your way through your muscle groups in your body, and many times it can help you slow down your thinking and get you ready for some rest. So there are 3 strategies there: the 4-second breathe box, the sensory scan, and the body scan.
Great information, such great information. And we'll have some more information on those on our show notes page if anybody wants any of that. Andy, if you could just get one point across today to our listeners, what do you want that one point to be?
I think the thing that I would stress the most here from our conversation today is just how important being mentally healthy and mentally strong in the workplace is, and taking the risk of checking on, whether it's an employee or a coworker, checking on that person, asking some open-ended questions and finding out how they're doing. Kind of going back to what we discussed before, talking about caring personally and caring enough to ask. Remember that stress, it separates us from mind and body. And so when we can talk about it openly with someone, or we can do some of those exercises that I mentioned. The stress decreases and presumably our performance and our work performance increases.
Well, Andy, if somebody wanted to learn more about the work that you do with individuals and companies, what should they do next?
Yeah, meltoncounseling.com is my website there, and I have information there related to counseling and coaching, and be glad to talk with you from a counseling perspective. It's in the state of Tennessee, so if any of your Tennessee listeners are interested, then I've got counseling resources there. Otherwise, for your broader audience, coaching may be more the thing that they're looking for. But feel free to reach out and be glad to have a conversation. And if you are an employer who's dealing with some challenging mental health issues in the workplace, I'd be glad to jump on a phone call and help walk you through some of that if you'd like.
Thank you for that, Andy. And we'll make sure to have all of your information on our show notes pages so that way people can find you very easily. So thank you for everything that you shared today. Very helpful. I have no doubt that somebody is listening right now that really needed to hear that. So thank you for sharing that message. I do want to shift gears slightly. We're going to go to the lightning round questions. So these are similar questions that I ask of all of my guests so we can just get to know you a little bit better. So are you ready for the lightning round, Dr. Melton?
I'm ready. Let's go. Fire away.
So, Andy, question number one, if you could go back in time and talk to your former self on your very first day as a counselor, what advice would you give yourself?
I would give the advice that I actually received, and I'm so grateful for it, that you will learn from every client you ever see. You will learn something new or learn something about life from each one. I think when I first started out, I thought I was going to be doing the teaching. I was going to be delivering the wisdom. And I do sometimes, but boy, I learned so much from all of my clients. So yeah, that would be the advice.
Andy, I normally ask my second question with what are the last few books that you've read, but I was hoping, if you wouldn't mind, you've got access to a lot of resources around the topic that we're talking about today. Would you mind, instead of answering that question, putting some resources on our show notes page that can help everybody further this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll give you some books and some maybe websites that are really useful in this topic area. I'd be glad to do that. You bet.
We appreciate that. My next question, when Hollywood makes a movie about Dr. Andy Melton, who do you want playing Andy?
I would go with Alan Richson. Is that his name? Jack Reacher. That guy is a beast.
That guy.
Yeah, from the latest Amazon Reacher series. But yeah, that guy's a beast. He's fun to watch. So yeah, there you go, Alan Richson.
Andy, my last question: if you had the power to talk to anybody throughout history, who would it be with and why?
I think in my current self, let's see, I'd go with Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was one who said, "The glow of one warm thought is to me worth more than any amount of money." And of course, he was one of our founding fathers in nation here. But yeah, he would be somebody I'd love to sit down with.
Well, Andy, I have absolutely loved sitting down with you today and talking about a topic that just does not get enough airtime. So thank you so much for not only giving us some words around the topic, but also some techniques on how we can help ourselves. Thanks for coming on the program, Andy.
Hey, thanks for having me, Trace. Really appreciate it.
Well, Andy, thanks again for coming on the podcast. And Nation, I know this isn't a comfortable topic, and I know a lot of us are either dealing with something around this topic, or at the very least, we know somebody who is dealing with something around this topic. And I wanted to give you some sort of framework where you could do something with it. So Andy shared a lot of techniques. He shared a lot of resources. We're going to have all of those on our show notes page. And I will say this is getting better, but it is far from perfect. It used to be that you didn't talk about any of this in the workplace. Hey, that's personal. You leave that at the door. When you come in here, it is just work. That's all we care about. Well, Nation, we're not one person at home. We're not one person at work. And I know a lot of us try to keep those things separately. And of course, I'm not saying don't be professional, but we are a person, and that person has all the things that are going on in our personal life and in our business life. And sometimes one of those areas will flood over into the other area. And when it does, what do we do around that? So I wanted to give you some handles around the topic like this. How do you even start to have a conversation with a coworker? Maybe it's a family member. And Andy just does such a great job of taking this topic and making it bite-sized so we can do something with it. And like I mentioned, all the resources that he mentioned are going to be on the show notes page. It's my hope that you can use some of those resources, maybe for yourself or somebody that you know. Because let's face it, life is difficult, and there are a lot of difficult things that happen in life. And a lot of times we see people we work with more than we see some of our family members. And I'm not saying that our teammates are family, but if we're not supporting our team members to be their best, then we're not going to be the best team. So there's definitely something in it for all of us. And it's my hope that you know how to have some of those hard conversations, or at least how to start some of those conversations, or at least where to go to get some information that you can give to somebody that might be experiencing some of the things that we talked about here today. Well, Nation, I met Andy through another mastermind group that I am a member of called Iron Sharpens Iron. And in that group, we are talking about all sorts of hard things. Things that are going on in business, things that are going on in our personal life, things that we probably would not tell anybody else. And you talk about a vulnerable group. That is a vulnerable group. Oh my gosh, this is a room full of professionals. We're all business owners. We are all successful, and we're going to share something that we're not having success with, or we're having some sort of issue with. And the initial thought is that I'm the only one in this room that's having this problem or a problem. All these other people have gotten it together. And I will tell you, that's not the case. That's what it looks like on the surface. But if you could see what the duck looks like underneath water, it is not as calm as it looks like above the water. So by having a group that you can be vulnerable with, where you can share these items, most of the time when you do that, when I do that, another member will say, I'm so glad you brought this up. I've had the same issue. Or they'll share something around that issue that they've dealt with in the past. We do not live in a vacuum, and things that we're personally experiencing, we're probably not the only people that are only experiencing that. And there is just something that happens that when we tell people something that's inside, that's bothering us, and we get it out there, and it's now out with people that we trust, that we're able to have that release the power it holds over us. There's some biblical stuff there. I'm not going to get into that on this podcast, but when we're able to release that and tell other people, it's just amazing on how that changes your whole mental attitude around that topic. But not only does it help your mind space, it also allows the people you're talking to kind of lean in and reach to lift you up and out of whatever you are dealing with. So it's my hope that you have some sort of group like this, that you can do the very things that I'm doing with Dr. Andy Melton and all the other 10 people that are in that group. So if you have a group like that, great. Make sure that you are using it. If you don't have a group like that, I'm going to suggest you find one. Life is really hard. It's even harder when you try to do it alone, and we're not made to do it alone. So There are plenty of groups out there, folks. Whatever area you feel that group should be in, whether it is on a more spiritual level, maybe it's on a more business level, maybe it's a more hobby type level, whatever it is, they all exist out there, but you need to find it and you need to be in a group like that. So, Nation, it's my hope that you go out there and you don't let these things stay bottled up, that you have people that you are talking about and to with these items. And if you need any help with that, let me know and I will try to find some resources for you. And Nation, it's my hope that some of the resources that we had for you in today's episode will help you with maybe some of the things that you or some of the people you know are dealing with. The last thing I'll leave you with, if there is ever any issue or any thought around suicide, the crisis number in the United States is 988. Remember that, maybe write that down. But if you ever need that, those are the people that you want to call. And if you have access to a mental health professional, of course, that is somebody that you want to talk about. That is way above my pay grade, but it's not above Dr. Andy Melton's, and he's got all of his contact information on the show notes page. Nation, stay healthy, stay smart. Make sure we're taking care of each other, and we will see you on Monday for a brand new episode, not just Monday, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week, because next week is Industrial Water Week, and we've got so much to celebrate, but we can't celebrate it without you, so make sure that you tune in each and every day next week. Have a great Industrial Water Week, folks. See you next week. Accelerate your success. Why go it alone when you can get further faster and have more fun doing it? The Rising Tide Mastermind offers a dynamic environment where you can grow professionally and personally while enjoying the journey. To find out more about the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you.